how did Buck first come about? And I'm kind of curious, like, what that whole experience of building a company was like, especially your involvement in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we were at a pretty interesting time when we started. It was early 2000s, and it was a really disruptive time in the media landscape in general. Like, this was the first kind of .com bubble, and that's right when I graduated from film school. Or, I went to a liberal arts college, but my degree was in filmmaking, and I found that I just had student loans to pay off. And so I really just, kind of fell into this world of web and content. And I was at this place called Heavy, which was a kind of one of the first broadband media sites. And that's where I met my current partner, Ryan Honey, and also a lot of other folks that are at Buck right now. And I think it was a really interesting time in that, like, we were figuring out there was a license to sort of do things differently at that time. And so a lot of people that got involved in making content, I think we're doing it with a fresh start. It was at the heyday of personal computing, where you no longer had to have a big flame suite in order to make the thing that you needed to make. And so I think we were kind of lucky in this sense that we were small enough that we could be nimble and kind of write a new way of working that wasn't so encumbered by some of the big spends or the big pipelines of some of the larger shops at that time. So we could kind of adapt in this disruptive period, but we were also early enough that we kind of, while it was a competitive landscape, it wasn't so saturated the way it is right now. So I think, like, we were in this interesting time where we just kind of were exploring. And I think we've been able to continue to do that as we've grown. And we've kind of continued to be able to create small teams, small nimble teams for smaller or nimble projects. But then as we've grown kind of and scaled, still have a really large, robust, amazing CG team, for example, or branding team where we can take on larger, much more complex problems at the same time. And as opposed to, like, I think some other companies, I guess the analogy would be like, if you're a hammer, you're always going to see the nail, or whatever the phrase is, right? Where it's sort of always got to get pushed through a different pipeline. We've always been much more, I would say, of a design group that thinks, what's the brief and how do we respond to the brief, and what's the team that we need to do that? That might mean a 3-person team, or it might mean 103-person team. And it might be made up of, each time it's going to be made up of a sort of bespoke group of folks,
What do you find as the sweet spot? Do you prefer working with smaller, more intimate teams, or bigger teams, knowing that it takes an army to change the world?
I think both of them can be really gratifying. I think that to me, it's always amazing to see something change beyond what you could imagine it to be, right? And that's what's, to me, is the most exciting part of, like, the collaborative nature of what we do, is that, like, my imagination is limited to my own experience. And so when you're able to bring people on and truly integrate and really live the idea that good ideas come from everywhere, and you're all sort of able to build up on those ideas, like, then it turns into something that you didn't even imagine. And when it's better than what you imagined through touching all these different people, that's really cool. And to see that at scale is pretty awesome. I would say that, like, the larger the teams get, sometimes, especially in this environment, this, like, more remote environment, sometimes I think it gets even harder to be for that magic to happen. Sometimes at a certain point, it kind of starts to become more transactional, right? Where you're like, okay, we've got a half an hour for this dailies meeting. You do this, you do this, you do this, as opposed to really being able to, like, probe or ask questions, or have people be like, okay, I know you're asking me to do that, but have you thought about what if we did it this way? And, be able to build on each other's ideas. So I think they're both can be really exciting, but, I do think sometimes for that really, truly creative stuff, there can be a sweet spot in terms of, like, the core team.
Yeah, no, that's what makes total sense. Jumping around a little bit with Buck and the projects you guys do, obviously you guys have been around for a very long time. Obviously you can't say yes to every single project that comes in the door. How do you typically choose what type of projects to get excited about and want to work on? Is it more the relationship? Is it more the content type, or what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's shifted over the years probably, and really even over from day to day. But, that is we do turn down a ton of work. And I would say that, a lot of what I think has driven Buck's success is that we're a thoughtful and curious and bunch, right? So we will entertain lots of different things. And just because it might be something that doesn't speak to me creatively or financially or whatever, doesn't mean that it's not right for the team or for Buck. And that's, as we've grown, that kind of, I would say, mindset has grown exponentially. So there's lots of minds and lots of considerations that go into what we take and what we don't take. I would say what's changed over the years is we've always been a good blend of business and creative. And I think everyone at Buck, we've always been a very open environment. We've always talked openly about our financials, about budgets. I really never liked the idea that agencies sort of separated those two, because I feel like especially if you're curious and creative and a craftsperson, you're like, tell me where the walls in the sandbox are that I can play, because there's lots that we can do with as long as that information is shared. So I think we've always had a healthy blend, even in our creative leadership, of really thinking about, is this financially viable? Are we going to be able to make something great with this budget? Can we control that? Can we have a seat at the table with the client that's saying, you've asked for this, but given these parameters, timeline, budget, et cetera, what if we did this? I think, that sort of way of working has always been valuable. And so I think we've seen shift over time is that relationship is probably the thing that, we used to think about, is it a financial opportunity? Is it a creative opportunity? More so, what's the timeline? Those are probably like the three main considerations back in the day. Now it's shifted a bit more to, what's the relationship and what's the ask, and how is this furthering our creative relationships with our we call them our partners, rather than our clients. Because I think that's more and more the way that we work. It's like they're really trusting us to come in and work closely with them to help figure out we're sort of the trusted experts in what we can and should deliver, and they're the trusted experts in terms of their brand, and those are like the ideal relationships. And so that's often how we're thinking of it these days.
I like that a lot. At a certain point, you're going to get to a certain success threshold that you're going to always have work coming in. So it's not about chasing the opportunity. It's more about trying to weigh the pros and cons with anything. And at least for me, it's always relationship. Like beyond anything else, I think that the money is always going to be there one way or another. It's more about who do I want to work with, or what relationship do I want to nurture, and just, hey, I love working with this person. We get each other, and that's like priceless. You can't build that otherwise. So it's more about finding those right partnerships.